everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rabbi's Daughter podcast. Very happy to be here. I'm Shira, the daughter, clearly, and I'm here with Abba. Hello, Abba.
Hello, Shira.
Hello. Today we're going to speak about authority and boundaries because they mix up a bit. It's a very interesting topic because it's very different in the Haredi space. Even parents and teachers and rabbis, they have a lot of authority. I think more than people who are not Haredi, we can say. So let's try to cover it. My first question is, what's your experience with authority in the Haredi space? I know your parents weren't Haredi, so it was probably a bit different, but in the Haredi space, did you experience that?
Well, thank you, Shira. That's a good topic and a good question. I'll skip parents for the moment. Let's start with rabbis, because the rabbinical authority, you know what, the parental authority also have experience from both sides, as a child and as a parent, of course. But if we want to speak about what's special about the Haredi space, I think the rabbinical authority is more unique, or more, it sticks out more in the Haredi space in terms of what's special or unique. And even that I've experienced on both sides as a rabbi and also as a subject of rabbis. Of course, I'm not a grand rabbi. I'm not, Gedolei Hadar. But
not yet.
Thank you, Shir. I don't aspire to that particular station. It's not one that I identify with so much. And we can speak about that too, exactly why. I'll tell you something. As a rabbi, I have this rich experience of people who would like the rabbi to make decisions for them. Meaning they see the rabbinical authority as a place that they can rely on. They can say, we have this and this dilemma. Like, Rabbi, just tell us what to do. And it's fascinating for me that, rabbis do this. That when I became a community rabbi in Ramot, so one of my first kind of introductory speech kind of thing, it wasn't the first time I spoke to the community, of course, but it was kind of when I laid out the vision. So I told the community, whoever showed up, but I mention this often, that I don't see myself as a rabbi as an authority that will kind of replace the individual responsibility of the community members. I tell them, I do not want you to outsource your autonomy or your responsibility to me as a rabbi. I'm happy to give you guidance. I'm happy to go through the different dilemmas that you're facing and try to enrich your kind of knowledge, your appreciation, the prices that you might have to pay on either side of the decision. And of course, if it's halachic, then I'm able to give halachic background and information. But I don't want to replace your own autonomy and your own responsibility. I think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives each one of us his own ability to make the core decisions that he needs to make. And a person should not outsource or should not forego that gift by kind of placing it at the footstep of the rabbi and allowing him to make that decision for him. So that's the reason how I got to that was because in my own experience, I felt that in different stations that I'd come to, I had the privilege of rabbis who allowed me that space. Meaning both, by the way, parents and rabbis. I grew up with parents who really gave me space to make decisions and trusted me. And I always felt that was a special gift, to have parents who trust you. And of course, they offered guidance and advice and so on. But both parents and rabbis who allowed me that space to make decisions, even though, of course, they offered guidance. Rav Moshe Shapira, and Havdil ben Chaim Lechaim Rav Asher Weiss, who are, very significant rabbis in my life, who definitely gave me that space. Where did I encounter authority that was more kind of the more, I wouldn't say menacing, but the more strict, firm type of authority? When I started the Tzarachian journal, this goes back, about a decade, a bit less than a decade. So soon after it started, I get a call from one of the leading rabbis in Bnei Brak, really Gedolei Hadar orientation rabbis. And he says, we need to talk. And because he got complaints. He got complaints about Tzarachian as a journal that encourages thought and kind of, it's a journal of ideas, of thinking, and it brings different aspects and also different opinions about core topics. And this was perceived by certain clearly readers as something which was not okay, something inappropriate, something that was a threat to the integrity of the Haredi space. And I get called in by this rabbinic figure in Bnei Brak, and we had multiple conversations about it, and it was.
Did he listen, or it was just like you have to close it?
So I have to say, to this particular rabbinic figure's credit, he did listen. He didn't really agree. One of the things he said was, I don't get it. Why do you have to bring different aspects of an issue? Just say what the truth is. Just say what is right, and that's it. Why do you need to say different opinions and have different authors and so on? Just say the right. So it's clearly a different perspective. But in the end, I think there was an understanding there that this was needed for a large and growing segment within the Haredi space. And even though, sometimes he used to say, I see that even regular Avreichim are reading Tzarachian, so it's not okay. I told them, how are they reading it? If they're reading it, it means that they must have internet access and not the Haredi, the strong filters that don't allow it through.
That was 9 years ago. So.
A few years ago, yeah. But so that helped me for a bit, but it didn't help me all the way. Meaning, ultimately, the Tzarachian was okay, but some of the programs that I run, there were complaints against the programs that they were too open and that they, somehow, they're subversive. They're not subversive, but not at all, actually. The whole point of the programs is how to be Haredi on the one hand, but on the other hand, be able to translate your values into Hebrew, that you're able to communicate them and to be strong with them, even when you're outside of the Haredi space, where so many of our participants are. But nevertheless, there were, of course, detractors, people who didn't like them. And in the end, there was this kind of rabbinic letter that came out against the programs that I operate.
I remember that.
Yated Ne'eman was published in Yated Ne'eman. It wasn't fun, but there I definitely saw the force of rabbinic authority, which is a place where, in terms of the public space, what I spoke to you before about the rabbinic counseling, that's in a private space. This was a public issue. Is Tzarachian, which is a public question, right? It's there for the public. Is it okay? Are these programs, right, the Iyun leadership programs or educational programs that they turn to the general public, are they okay or not? And on that, the rabbis, at least in their perception, they felt that it's their responsibility to weigh in on that. And if they think it's not okay, then they'll actually put a public letter out there. And the other thing I found was that it didn't make any difference, meaning, people carried on coming to the programs. It wasn't, it didn't.
Bad publicity is the best kind of publicity.
They say any publicity is good publicity, including this type. I don't know. I think that the rabbinical authority that used to hold so much power within the Haredi space doesn't hold quite the same sway anymore, and therefore, it wasn't convenient. I didn't like it, especially because I had personal relationships with some of the people that signed, so it wasn't pleasant. But that's certainly somewhat where I faced this concept of rabbinical authority. And there are plenty of other experiences also, but I'll go back
just
to you.
thinking about it. I don't think I've ever felt rabbinic authority in my life. I don't know what it means.
In school?
In school, it was, well, teachers expected us to listen to them, but, you know, it wasn't something that I actually had to do. But I do feel there are two sides to it, because, you know, sometimes I think I feel sometimes that I want someone to make the decisions for me. Thing is, though, I do pick the people that I want them to make the decision for me. It's not like someone tells me, hey, I'm going to do this for you, which is not good. I don't think it's good. I think that, like you said, a person should own his own decisions and live his own life without people telling him what to do. But on the other hand, when you speak about rabbinic authority, then there is a place that you have to say, wait, these are rabbis, and if they all say one thing, then, well, maybe I should, like, how do you say, להרכין את הראש?
Lower your head.
Yeah. Is that an expression?
Yeah.
Oh, good. And to do what they say. Like, I remember a story, I don't remember who it was, but this, like, big rabbi was, I guess, hundreds of years ago, that he wrote books, and they told him to burn them or to bury them, and he did, because I don't know. You know what? I might get confused.
The Ramchal Luzzatto was persecuted, but his books were not burned.
Not burned.
And he didn't bury them either.
So there was someone
What he did
else.
do was stop writing about Kabbalah and start writing Mesilat Yesharim. That's why we have this book, Mesilat Yesharim, a great sefer, a great Musa work, and we have it because the Ramchal was kind of his more Kabbalistic works were banned, but he was able to write kind of non-Kabbalistic, even though they're founded on Kabbalah. Yeah. But I'll tell you something.
No, wait, I just want to finish this. So I don't remember who it was.
Yes.
But he wrote this, like, he wrote many books, and they told him to, I guess, bury them. And someone, like, many years after, found, like, a copy somewhere, somehow, and he published it, and now we have it. But I remember feeling like, wow, like he said, he was really young, and he said, okay, if the rabbis tell me to do this, so I do it, even though these are my books and I worked hard for it, but I do it. And there is something special in it. But today, it's not that there is a rabbi that I say, hey, I'll follow whatever he say all the time.
So a couple of points here, a very nice opening statement, and a couple of points. First of all, I think it's very, very important to choose your rabbis. Meaning, today we're not in a situation where we have one rabbi for one community, and just that's the rabbi. There are places in the world where that's the case. Let's say in a small town in the United States, or wherever you are in the world, it could be that that's just the rabbi.
Chassidiyot are more like that.
Or let's say in a Hasidic group, so your Rebbe, he's your rabbi. You don't get to choose your rabbi. But a lot of people, including you, let's say, you have the privilege of being able to choose who your rabbi is. And that's certainly what I did. Meaning I found the rabbis that I felt were like-minded, that would be able to relate to me and to my life circumstances in a way that to me feels intuitive, feels right, and that they would be able to give me the guidance that I need. Doesn't mean that you accept, that you abrogate or you give away your responsibility. No. But you go to a rabbi or to an authority that you feel is right for you. And that's very important. And we have the privilege of being able to do that. I think that's a big deal. But the second part of what you said, which is the part of authority, that relates to something that comes up in this week's Parsha Shoftim, which speaks about the Jewish people and authority over the Jewish people. Right? There is such a thing as a Sanhedrin or Beis Din Hagadol, right? This higher body of authority which sits in Yerushalayim, okay, at the Lishkat HaGazis, next to the Beis HaMikdash. And Torah comes forth from there. And the idea there is that there needs to be a uniform leadership, meaning the idea of, let's say, halacha, which is what this institution is all about, right? The pasuk says that when there'll be some dispute, bein dam ledam, bein din ledin, nega lenega, any type of halacha, also in Divrei Hayomim, in Perek Yutet, right? Whether it's a question of chukei, mishpatim, mitzvot, whatever it is, the Beis Din HaGadol get to decide, and then everybody has to follow the instruction of the Beis Din HaGadol. Why? Because nobody has a personal halacha. Nobody has his own halacha. Halacha is something national. Our connection with Hashem is a national connection with Hashem, and therefore the halacha has to apply to the nation. And that's the ideal, that we're all doing one halacha. Now, I might think it's wrong, and I'm allowed to think it's wrong. The Ramban says you're allowed to think it's wrong, but you still have to do it, because you are beholden to the national halacha, to what the nation does as a member of the Jewish people. That's what the Jewish people do. And in communities, it's similar. So when we're thinking about, let's say, rabbinic authority in the communal sense, when there's a communal issue, something that relates to the community at large, then of course there's a space for community leadership, that they get to call the shots. So for example, the boundaries of that will depend on the nature of the community. To what degree does that leadership get to call the shots for what you study in schools? What are schools allowed to teach? The curriculum of a school, let's say, or the kind of internet screening that people have, or the kind of how do we admit children into yeshiva, based on which criteria? I don't know. There's so many questions that are, public questions on the one hand, but also affect you on an individual level. And the question of the type of authority or the boundaries, the scope of the authority will depend on the nature of the community. We don't have a Beis Din HaGadol today.
You have to have a line somewhere, because you can't just say whoever doesn't follow all the rules, he's not part of our community anymore. I mean, you can, and maybe a few decades ago that's the way it was, but today it's just not. Well,
there's also a line between a community and a cult, meaning when it becomes too when it becomes too overbearing, and individual lives become controlled by this authority.
Like 1984.
Let's say 1984 as an extreme example. It's not a cult exactly, but it's right.
No, but it's a place where you couldn't make your own choices.
Right, you couldn't even think. In a
very extreme way.
You couldn't think for yourself, right? And that's what happens in a cult. You have a charismatic leader who kind of takes over people's individual autonomy on every level, and every decision, and even the freedom to think is denied the cult members, because your core being is an extension of the cult leader.
Yeah.
And are there such groups within Haredi Judaism? Yes, but generally speaking, we don't want to characterize Haredi Judaism as being cultish. Maybe there are elements that are, but that's an important boundary.
Yeah, can you see elements of a cult in like regular Jewish communities?
No, I don't think so. I'm saying there are groups within that dress Haredi, that look Haredi. What's the cult called? The one that travels around the world?
Oh.
Left Ahor.
Yeah, they were in Iran.
Right, Left Ahor as an extreme example. I could give other, less extreme examples that have cultish behavior. Okay, where
I guess
rabbis
people from outside say Haredim are a cult.
Where if rabbis, are entering the most private and personal spaces, the spaces of the most intimate relationships, and telling people what to do and what not to do and so on, it can border on cultish. Meaning we don't. There's something you've read Ayn Rand, I know, right? Ayn Rand, and we're not Ayn Rand groupies
I love
here.
her book.
You love her group. We're not Ayn Rand groupies. I think you'll agree. Okay, we're not But the libertarian idea, right? The idea in which we don't want to police people, okay? We don't want to become a police community or a police state. We want to leave a free market for ideas and for the conception of the good, and to provide a framework that will, of course, encourage the good, right? Which is the ideas of tzedakah, of mishpat, of righteousness, of justice, and the institutions that will, at the end of the day, like the Torah institutions, like the Beis Gadol, right? That will ensure we have a society that predicates righteousness and justice, but then to leave individuals the freedom to live their lives.
I also think it's about trusting people, because I felt many times when I was in more mainstream Haredi places that they didn't trust me, not really, to make my own decisions. And you can see people don't trust their kids to choose who to marry. It's you have to trust people that they can choose the right thing. I mean, the right thing is also like a concept, but you have to trust people that they can live a good life that Hashem wants them to, and to make their own decisions. And if you don't trust them, then you want to make the decision for them.
Well, you have to trust people to make mistakes, because they will. People will make mistakes. And sometimes as parents, we say, oh no, we've made those mistakes already. We don't want you to make that mistake. But that's often kind of can lead you down a rabbit hole, can lead you down a track which is unhealthy relationship with the kids, because the kids want to feel that the parents trust them, and the kids will make mistakes. You have this often with Baal Tshuva families. Baal Tshuva families, that their own children now, they've been brought up in a family that's made like real decisions, that's gone against the grain, that went against their own society.
Problem is, though, that the parents are usually the type that would go against the society, and it comes in the genes. So the kids are also like, so
the kids also
rebellious.
Want to. Well, and that's also what they saw at home. But then the parents say, 1 second, we've already made that decision. Like, we've already found the light. We found the good. And now we're packaging it for you, and we're giving it to you. And now why are you questioning this? It's all wrong. We did that questioning when we had to. Now you don't have to anymore. Everything's good.
I think questioning everything, I guess questioning everything is fine. Like, questioning is, I don't think you should put boundaries on that.
Well, you could say that, and I tend to agree. Even in Zaken Mamre, which is the idea of, right, the Zaken Mamre is the elder, okay, he's a person with authority, he's a rabbi, let's say, okay, but he wants to go against the ruling of Beis Gadol. So according to many authorities, according to many Rishonim, he's allowed to question, is it right or wrong? But he's not allowed to go against it. He's not allowed to give a ruling against. And over here also, like you said, you can question anything you want. Sure, you can question, but the question that follows that is what happens after people question things. And that's why you have parents who get very afraid from, questioning, because where's it going to lead? And especially parents who don't have this confidence, let's say, to allow their children, it depends on the kind of kind of home environment that you provide. If you're able to provide a confident home environment, which is stable and strong and loving and confident in its way, then you can also, with some confidence, allow your child the space to ask the questions, because you know that the space that you've provided is a safe one, is a strong one, is a stable one. And if you don't feel stable in the space, then you also feel undermined, or you feel that the questioning is a threat, because it threatens to undermine the integrity of what you've built. And that's not simple. It depends on the family.
It's a bit different, though, from trusting your kids to make mistakes. It's more about trusting your kids to make good choices in their way.
Yeah, but there'll always be mistakes. It's not, You know, if you only trust your kids to make the right choices, then you don't trust them.
Look, when parents choose for their kids who to marry,
who does that? No one does that. I mean, in some communities, in Hasidic communities and so on.
I mean, it's still around.
Right, and there's sometimes pressure. It depends on the community and the family.
Even in like regular Haredi system, the parents have a lot to say about it.
Which is good or not? What do you think?
I wouldn't want that to be the case in my life. But it's not bad. Okay,
sure, we'll stop telling you who to marry. That's
all. Thank you. But it's not bad. It's a way, and I there shouldn't be too much pressure, and then it's like someone's decision. But parents.
Okay, so what are you saying? That we need a balance.
Thing is,
now, where that balance is exactly.
Thing is, though, when parents tell their kids who to marry, it's not about, I'm afraid he'll make mistakes. It's more about, I just rule over his life.
Yeah, so if a parent is telling a child who to marry, then he's denying that child autonomy in the most core, basic, fundamental space of who he's going to build his future life with. And even though autonomy is a kind of modern idea, but we kind of like it. You know, we feel, at least we've internalized it, meaning we feel that, don't forget, in the past it wasn't this way. In the past it was parents who made the decision of who you marry, of which occupation you're going to take up, of where you would live. You know, it was assumed, it was obvious. The idea that I'm going to make my own decision on that, I'm going to have autonomy on that is a relatively new idea. But we have certainly integrated that idea on many levels, but not on all levels. And that speaks to the question of authority, meaning of parental authority, community authority versus your personal decision making. And even though we want to make our own decisions, but we want them to be informed by parents, by community, by rabbis, meaning the rabbis are the community leaders and the parents are the leaders of the home. And we don't want to start from scratch. We want our decisions to be informed. So there's a balance.
Yeah, you just have to listen to your heart.
No, what does that mean?
No, in the balance way. Like not in a bad way.
Listen to your heart sounds like no authority.
No, I mean that you have to find the balance between authority and choose what you believe is right. You just feed it. You don't really know.
Well, the main responsibility for that, though, is on the parents or on the rabbis. If even look at the Gedolim, great rabbis, over the past few generations, you'll see tremendous variance, difference concerning how they see their role. You know, there were Rabbanim who felt that their role was really to micromanage society, to be on top of everything. Rav Shach was a little bit like that. When there was something out there, somebody was teaching in a style that he didn't appreciate, or content that he felt was perhaps pushing boundaries a bit too Kabbalistic, or whatever it might be, he called that educator in and told him that's not what we do. And
really?
In Cheder, where do you start teaching children in Cheder from Vayikra, or do you do a bit of Bereshis first, or I don't know. He would call them in. He said, no, that's not what we do. Meaning there was strong authority in the small details, like micromanaging a society, while somebody like, for example, Rav Aaron Leib Steinman, all Zeichat Tzaddik Livracha, of course, he was much more laissez-faire. He wasn't libertarian in the full sense of the word, but he was much more, you know what? We need to give space for society to develop in its own dynamic, with its own way. We have to allow for initiatives to come from the field and to allow them to grow and to develop. And down the line, we can weigh in, of course. You know, that's the job of the rabbinical authority, or the way many see it is to be a checks and balances, you know, to provide a certain check, a certain boundaries and so on, but to allow things to develop from society. And a lot does and did develop from within the Haredi space from the field, meaning there's different models of rabbinic authority in this sense, that there are those who allow more space and there are those who want to be more controlling. And the same is true for parents. The same is true for educators, for teachers. How much space do you give? And certainly I'm of the type that believes that there must be space for the individual.
Do you think
and for communities, for things in the field, in order to allow growth, in order to allow, because as rabbis, we don't have all the wisdom. Even great rabbis don't have all the wisdom. You have to allow the wisdom to accumulate from the space itself, but it does need a balance. And on the other hand, you do have to provide some checks. That's what rabbis do in my own community. I have to do that, to provide some.
What do you mean to provide checks? It's like to make a decision, and then that's how our community is.
To provide.
What checks do you provide for the community?
To say that there are some things that to provide boundaries, like every home does, and every community does.
At home, you have a boundary of which movies do you let your kids to watch, or
Well, let's give a simple example, right? You can have a home in which movies are forbidden.
Right.
Okay, that's a boundary. We don't allow movies, but we do allow books. Okay, and within books, there's a lot of variety. You can have a lot of books, but even within the book field, there are also boundaries.
So how do you do that in a community? What checks do you have in your community?
Well, let's say, for example, in the Haredi space, so there was a time when I don't know if they do this even today, when schools would not admit. There was a time. Let's go back. There was a time when schools would not admit anyone that has a television set at home. Why? Because a TV set, you're like,
how would they know?
How would they know? Because you have an antenna on your roof if you have a TV set. Okay, so they knew. And if you have a TV set, that's a boundary. Why? Because having television undermines what Haredi society is all about. Haredi society is about not bringing in all of the toxic, caustic, damaging elements of Western or secular culture into your homes and into your schools and into your society. So that's a boundary. And the rabbinic authority would ensure that boundary is met. Do you understand what I mean?
I do.
Now that doesn't mean, again, is that good or bad? We could argue it out, but every community will have some boundaries. There isn't any community without some boundaries. Even in a libertarian society, you'll have the society itself will provide its own social sanctions and have those boundaries.
Today, like in the secular space mainly, you don't really have boundaries. I mean, you see what happens, let's say, in America with like the young liberals. They don't really have an authority that tells them what to do, but the society itself creates its own boundaries. And then if you don't think like them or dress like them or whatever it is, then you can't be really part of their community.
Yeah, I mean, of course, in the progressive spaces, there are strong boundaries on what you're allowed to say.
Probably like the strongest.
Yeah, it's dictatorial, or it can be dictatorial.
Just an example of when you take something to extreme, then it's like the same thing.
At the end of the day, we're not living an individual life. We're living individual lives as parts of groups, societies, communities, nations, and of course those provide boundaries and those have a leadership, and I think that there's something very special about having a rabbinic leadership that thinks from a Torah perspective, what's right for the community. I think that it needs, you see leaders come and go, and they have their own disposition, their own kind of inclination about how much to get involved in people's individual lives and so on. And I think the Torah itself, leaves a lot of space. There's a base in a gadol, which is for the big questions of society. What are those boundaries? We have chukim, we have mishpatim, right? And those chukim mishpatim, they provide the boundaries for a good society, right? Beyond that, you have to leave space for individuals to live, to thrive, to develop, to initiate. But then questions will come up, and those need to be decided based on the boundaries that we have.
Do you think we should have democracy in communities?
Well, democracy, in
the religious space.
The obvious question that one has to ask is, what do you mean? People use the word democracy.
Choosing the, let's say if there's a question that comes up, then instead of the rabbi deciding, unless it's a really halachic specific question, but if it's a general question about how do you say halach ruach and ideas, then you take a vote.
Well, first of all, there's a hundreds-year tradition of voting for a rabbi.
Right.
Right. The community chooses its rabbi. And this is a tradition going back, the Tshuvas of Chassam Sofer and other Rabbanim preceding him about questions of voting in communities, of the Rivash, Rishonim, about communities making votes on core issues of policy in the community. So that's not anything new. There definitely is a democratic element that was integrated into Jewish communities, and that's a question of how do you make decisions. That's not a question of authority. That's a question of who has the authority. Once those decisions are made, so that becomes binding on the community, on the individual. It's just another way of imagining or of modeling your authority. The authority is with the people. Okay, good, but the people still have authority, right? Meaning the decision is made, and once it's made, it's made. And the same is true of, the idea of Tovei Ha'ir. This is a body of appointed officials who have the authority, but they also have to take a vote and to decide, do you excommunicate Spinoza or not? You have to take a vote.
Would you excommunicate Spinoza?
I don't think that the excommunication tool today is a relevant tool.
Well, they sometimes try to.
Today, yeah, it's been done. You're right. People were put in cherem, and people are put in cherem even today, but it's become a less efficient tool. In the past, because the community was such a strong body, and such a the integrity of the community was so sanctified, and so somebody that would undermine it would be ejected from the community, and then he wouldn't be the threat to the community. He would be maybe a threat to other things, or he could join other groups, but you needed to have that belonging, and today it's different. It's much more fluid. Your sense of belonging is more fluid than it used to be, but I imagine it could still work in tight communities, in a Chasidus, in Belz or whatever. If you're excommunicated from Belz, it doesn't happen very much, but it could happen, I
guess. And do you think it's good,
the tool
yeah,
of excommunication? Listen, in the absence of other punishments, I guess it's possible. Don't forget, communities don't have other sanctions that they can do. That's why excommunication developed, because there were no other possible sanctions. In the past, somebody who would undermine the community, there'd be other way of sanctioning him. Today, that's the tool. I would apply it very, very rarely. I think it needs to be a very extreme case. But don't forget, there are boundaries. Avodah Zarah, as an example. Okay, idolatry. Idolatry is a strong boundary that the Torah provides, that it undermines the very foundations of the community, the foundations of what it means to lead a Jewish life. And if you have someone who's inciting to idolatry, then you'd better, deal with that threat in whichever way you can. And if the way you can deal with it is excommunication, then that would be the way to deal with it. Generally speaking, like I said, it's few and far between, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Okay, so I have a last question for you. If you had the authority, which book would you excommunicate?
Banning books.
Banning books. And just so you should know, when you say it now, then everyone is going to go read it. So
well, I think you've just answered your own question then. Meaning, I'll explain. Banning books. Do we want to ban books? perhaps we want to ban books. There are books that we would prefer that shouldn't exist. Okay, books that encourage atheism, books that encourage a life of evil, a life of wrongdoing, books that are pornographic, books that just shouldn't exist. But the thing is that we have enough experience to know that banning books, in a general sense, like you said, will not necessarily have the desired effect. And on the contrary, banning a book will often have the effect of bringing people to go buy them. This happened not so many years ago with a book written by somebody called Rav Nosson Kamenetsky. This is a son of Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky. He wrote these 2-volume, very difficult book, very, in his own style and with excursions. You don't want to know. Really a hard book to read. And a group of rabbis decided they want to ban it for specific reasons. And I won't get into the reasons. Some of them were very personal. They decided they want to ban it, and they banned it. And Rav Elyashiv got involved, and many Rabbanim got involved, and they banned the books. The books obviously became, bestsellers and so on, and everyone bought them. Now, it happens to be, it's a very hard read, so I don't think that this book would have taken off. I think people
do it for the say, like, we disagree with this book.
Yeah, so, again, like I'm saying, banning books in our day, I don't think is an effective tool. And therefore, I don't think I'm going to ban books. You have to know the limits of your authority.
Yeah.
You have to know what's effective authority. In a home, you can ban a book. You can say that book at home is banned. And you have to know what's that going to do to your children. Will they go and read it outside the home and just not tell you? You have to know the limits, the scope of your authority. And I would say, I would feel comfortable with banning books at home, I think.
I was trying to think of books you banned. Can't come up with anything.
You know what? Because I didn't have to ban books. Because I think the education was strong enough that the children knew by themselves. In fact, children came to me, you came to me, and said, this book shouldn't be allowed at home.
Yeah, I'm the censorship, of the family.
Yeah, you
because I read the books and then I'm like,
right. That happens
but I read them before.
Well, you start them, you don't necessarily finish them. But I'm saying, but you have to know the boundaries of your authority, and I think that book banning, I'm against book banning today because I think it's just counterproductive. There'll be a black market that will develop, and which happened in basically every case of books that were banned. Catcher in the Rye was banned.
Really?
Yes.
It's not that amazing. It's like cute.
It wasn't banned because it was amazing. It was banned because it was subversive on some level or inappropriate for teenagers or whatever. And it had the effect was the opposite. It was counterproductive. So one has to know the boundaries. So it is up to leaders to know the boundaries of their authorities. So I'm not against authority. Every society needs authority. You have to know the boundaries of your authority, and you have to know what kind of authority is also going to be stifling for the creativity, for the energy that a society needs in order to grow and be dynamic.
Yeah, I agree.
Good.
So thank you.
Thank you, Shira.
Thank you, Ava, and thank you everyone for watching and listening, and see you in the next one.
See you next time.